All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. It's our last day. It's day number 30, and I'm a little bit sad about that. Um, but 30 days that I've been doing this, it's been kind of awesome to show up every day and do this and be able to live stream during the weekdays. So I have mentioned that I am planning on doing another art challenge for October, but I haven't decided if I'm going to live stream it. I'm calling it a monster a day challenge, and it's just pretty much I'm going to sit down and make a monster every day, probably using lots of different materials, lots of different things. So maybe a little bit different than what I've been doing this month, but I kind of feel like it's pretty appropriate for October. And I love to do monsters. That's something that I've been doing. Actually, I saw a recent memory on Facebook that it was 5 years ago, basically, that I started doing monsters. So, uh, yeah. So that's what I'm going to do for October, and maybe I'll try to live stream some. But yeah, it's I've really enjoyed the live streaming, but it is kind of like getting it set up, getting it to work, worrying about whether the internet connection is going to stay steady. So. Anyway, I really appreciate those of you. Some of you tuned in every single day or almost every day. A lot of you have tuned in to the recorded video. So just really appreciate those of you that have stopped by to see what I've been doing, and really appreciate those of you that have been just working along. Some of you have been kind of using what I do as a basis for what you do. Others have been just sort of showing up and using this time to work on the things that they want to work on. So, but I just appreciate everyone that has been tuning in at any point during this series, and I've enjoyed it, and I do want to do more live streaming in the future, but it probably won't be every weekday. So, anyway, so if you are if you're tuning in and you want to jump into the comments and say hi, I love seeing where people are tuning in from. It's always great to see new names, and then old names as well. So I feel like I've gotten to know some of you because you do tune in and you comment and you share your art. So I really, really appreciate that. And it's just always awesome to see where people are and yeah. So anyway, I feel like after 29 days that I have a lot of good ideas, that there are things that I want to focus on in my journal, in my artwork, and I feel like this practice is like showing up every day is such a good practice, and pushing myself in different ways was a challenge, but I think it led to some breakthroughs. And yeah, if you listen to my podcast, I just released a podcast episode on Tuesday that basically talks about this breakthrough, and it was this notion of the journey, which probably doesn't surprise anybody that's been tuning in, because I've been using maps, I've been talking about this idea of the journey, but I really this idea kind of gelled in the sense of the hero's journey, and basically that's a story structure that's been developed. It was first kind of developed by Joseph Campbell back in 1949, and it's been refined by other people. But that hero's journey has really resonated with me. If you want to hear more, you can always go and listen to the podcast. So I kind of feel like this artwork I've been making has been part of that journey, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly what the artwork, well, how the artwork kind of ties into that notion. But that's what art's about. You get an idea, and it's like, okay, let me explore it, let me try it, let me do these things to really explore and go on an artistic journey. So, really appreciate you all tuning in. I see a lot of comments. I'm just going to take a look at those real quick. Okay. So again, quite a few familiar names, a few that aren't as familiar. So just welcome everybody that's tuning in. I have no idea what I'm going to do today. I haven't really sat down to think about it. I'll probably more than likely use a lot of the ideas, the images, the colors, the shapes, the things that I've been using, because it just kind of seems natural for that. So I don't expect this to be like some grand culminating project. It's just this is just another day. It just happens to be the last day of this particular project, but Anyway, let's go ahead and dive into it. So, as always, if you are making along with me, great. If you're doing your own thing, great. If you're just tuning in because you like to hear me drone on and on about stuff, that's great too. But let's go ahead and flip this over and I will get started. So, as always, I've got my 4x4 inch square paper. This has really been a good challenge using this small paper. And so I really recommend, if you haven't been trying to do something small, it's a good challenge to try. Like, putting limitations on ourselves is a great way to push our creativity. I've got my Inktense paints. So these are made by Derwent. I've used these a lot. These are the Core by Golden. But the Inktense has a lot of different colors, and I just feel like today I'm drawn back to some of those same colors that I've been using, and just really kind of going into those earth tones. We'll start off with some of this ochre. This is, I think, a red oxide, so it's kind of a reddish, rusty color. It's kind of a nice color to use. Just a little bit of a muted red. Let's see, we'll hit up this, this brown here. So sometimes I use a single color and kind of layer on top, and sometimes it's nice just to use a mix of colors and get some things down, get a nice variety back there. And as I've done before, I think I'm gonna just hit it up with some splatters. I like doing this, well, I do it on dry paper and do it on wet paper. When you do it on wet paper, it bleeds into the wet paint that's already there. So a lot of times it'll soften. Sometimes it'll totally disappear depending on how much water is there and how dark the paint is. Alright, let's hit that with the hairdryer. Alright, so here's a little bit of trivia. You may notice, especially whenever I do my the hair dryer, that sometimes this hand disappears out of frame. So I'm oftentimes checking comments, but more often than not, I am grabbing a drink of my tea as the hair dryer goes. So in case you were ever wondering where that hand went. So just using this stencil, I love kind of found stuff. I mean, I know that a lot of folks have huge stencil collections, and that they go out and buy a whole bunch or order them online. I like to either make my own, which that was an entirely different class. I did a class over the summer on stencil making. Stamp making as well, but I also love just kind of like finding. So this is, well, I've heard it called Punchinella, and it's basically sequin waste. And then people have artists have discovered like, oh, it's a great stencil, and you can find it. It's hard to find anymore, like in stores, but a lot of folks sell it on Etsy, and you can find it on eBay as well. But it's just a great little stencil, and I've got a whole variety of that. But the one thing with using the watercolor with any kind of stencil is that it bleeds underneath. But I really like that. And then there was still some residual paint from the last time that I used it. So sometimes it's kind of you get a little bit of a surprise, like, oh, I didn't know there was green on there. So, and I have a tendency not to clean them off. So it's always a surprise. All right, let's go ahead and go into my pencils. So if you've tuned in, you know how much I love these pencils. And I think yesterday or the day before we were talking, or I was talking about, they can be kind of expensive. So they are a premium, professional level material. But I also gave the advice of, when you see a set of something, you're like, oh, it's just so expensive. If those big box arts and crafts stores like Michael's here in the States sell them, and they have those coupons. So a lot of times you can score a nice set of them for 40 and even sometimes 50% off. So that's always a way to kind of think about it. And like, I know Michael's, they have those coupons pretty much every week. So it's not like this like once in a blue moon kind of thing. But no, I don't work for Derwent, even though it might be kind of cool to do that. But I like the paint. I like the pencils. I've never used their watercolor pencils, but I can imagine that they're a good quality. So my 3 squares, something that I've used a lot, partly because of this small format. I feel like, okay, 3 kind of fits pretty well, but I like that number 3. I may have mentioned this before. It's a very stable number. And if you think about a triangle is one of the most stable shapes. So I often will do things in multiples of 3. Not always, but sometimes. So I decided to go with some red here at the beginning, just to do something a little different, and then just make these squares kind of pop. Just looking through some of my collage materials here, trying to find. I think I'll go back. So security envelope, one of my favorite things to use. Just want to have a long, skinny strip. So one of the things I've done a lot is to use a long strip and just go through those squares. Not really sure why. I think just it's a interesting design choice. I think the strip kind of connects, well, it physically connects the squares, but then it ties it to the edge of the paper as well. So as I was putting glue on this, it slid a little bit and then kind of got stuck in the glue that was there. So I take my finger and rub it. Sometimes I can get rid of that glue. Sometimes I just make it worse. One thing about doing this for 30 days is that I've really gotten into a routine, and I've developed some rituals that I'm hoping that like things will continue. So I don't know if like 4 p.m. will be the a standard kind of time for me to sit down and make art, but at the beginning of all of this, I said one of the reasons I picked this was, number one, it fit into my schedule for all days of the week, but the other reason was that I struggle with this time of day. Just that this afternoon, I get sleepy. I get kind of lethargic. I just want to kind of lay down on the couch and take a nap. So I find like, yeah, I still feel that. I still kind of feel tired, and I've even said on this that there have been days I've showed up where I'm like, I'm just really tired today. But doing the live streaming has kind of allowed me to keep consistent with showing up. But because of that, because I get tired, I've developed this habit, this routine. So around 3 o'clock, I start to feel tired. Well, I brew some tea. And so I've been having some hot tea, just English breakfast. My wife and I went to England in the summer of 2019. And I kind of got in that habit of having some English tea. But it's great for me in the afternoon just to have that little bit of caffeine and have that little bit of a pickup. So like around 3:30, it's like, oh, I've got to have my tea. But I think it's a interesting routine ritual, and I think a lot of times we want to have those kind of rituals, those routines. They actually help us make art. Because we get in that habit. So as I was talking, I just sort of mindlessly picked up the pen and started drawing some of these organic lines that I like. In part, they're kind of like map lines, almost like recording the journey of just different lives going in a similar direction. And then also, it's a nice contrast to the geometric shapes and lines. It was really interesting. I think there's a lot of serendipity and synchronicity with things, and when we're in that habit of working on our art and we're exploring ideas, sometimes things pop up and we're just like, wow, okay. And I just remember I was doing this kind of imagery, and a lot of times I do it and it kind of looks like a tree. A lot of people have called it a tree. And I had mentioned probably halfway through, sometime in the middle of September, that I didn't necessarily see it as a tree. And I mentioned, like, oh, to me it's kind of like a cave. So I feel like, with these kind of lines, like this is kind of a cave-like structure. And didn't really think much about that notion of it being a cave. But then I was doing some research for The Hero's Journey. And so Joseph Campbell wrote about it in his book, A Hero of a Thousand Faces. And basically his premise was that a lot of myths follow the same story structure. And that's what has been called the hero's journey. And so Campbell came up with 3 acts to kind of tell this story, and he came up with 17 stages. And then a writer, Christopher Vogler, simplified that into 12. And so a lot of people use Vogler's 12 stages for when they're thinking about the hero's journey. And one of the stages that Vogler mentions is the inmost cave. And that's kind of like when our hero is basically like, I think of it, Star Wars is always one of my go-to examples. But so Star Wars, the inmost cave is basically whenever Luke Skywalker ends up in the original Star Wars, A New Hope, as some people call it, but it will always just be Star Wars to me. That it's when Luke Skywalker ends up on the Death Star to save Princess Leia. So he's basically the inmost cave of, for this, of Darth Vader, of the Empire. And so I just kind of thinking, when I read that and saw that the inmost cave, and then thinking about this imagery that I had been creating and referring to it as a cave, it just was like, whoa. Kind of serendipitous or synchronistic. Just trying to decide what to do next. I just realized that I'm not recording this to my computer, so it's recording to Facebook, and there'll be a recording on Facebook that people can tune in later. But then usually what I would do is I record it to my computer as well, and it's just a better resolution video that I then post on YouTube. But I have it set up where I have to manually start recording, and I forgot to do that today. That's not too bad. This is only the second time the entire month that I was doing live streams that I forgot to hit record. Oh well. Not much I can do about it now. But the nice thing is I can download the video from Facebook, but it's not the highest quality, so oh well. So just using some of this darker brown Inktense pencil just to put some lines in that organic form there, and then just spread it, trying to keep it in that form, create some contrast with the background. I feel like that wasn't quite enough of the brown. glue was sitting over there uncapped. I want to bring a slightly different color to that form. So I'm going to go back. There's a color that I really like. It's called mustard. But it's got a bit of a glow to it that I like. So I'm just going to kind of color and shade. And you might not really be able to see much happening right now. The one thing about the Inktense that I think sometimes people don't like is that they kind of give you like, oh, it looks like this color. So they're all blue barrels, and then they like have the color here, but that's not really true to the color that it is. And then if you look at the tip always looks different, and I think it's because it's that water soluble ink. And it doesn't really show its true color until you paint water over it. So I'm hoping that just by putting this down kind of over top, and it's transparent, I'm not pressing super hard, I don't want to have a whole lot. If I need to, I can always go back and add more. Typically what I would do is I would start with the mustard because it's a lighter color than the brown that I've used. But then I also like coming back with a lighter color just to kind of bring a little bit of a glow. I think that's just the easiest way of describing it. Let's go ahead and paint over that and see. And so I don't know how it's showing up on the video, but here in the studio, it just kind of gives us kind of a golden yellowish hue to it. So, kind of a mustard-like color. Maybe not as yellow as like a yellow mustard. That's the other thing. The Inktense pencils are named differently than like paints and such. So they don't have phthalo blue or phthalo green or raw umber. They give them names like mustard or Shiraz or dark chocolate. Now, unfortunately, when they do dry, a little bit of this glow goes away, and that's something that some folks, just with any kind of watercolor material or water-soluble material, that just happens. It just sort of fades. It seems like the water really brings out the vivid color, and then when it dries, it just sort of goes a little bit dull. And it's a big lament of any kind of watercolor material. So yeah, you can see how some of that kind of golden color faded a little bit, but it really helps solidify this organic form next to the red. I'm going to go back with the black pen. The question was asked about the stencil, this stuff. I call it Punchinella or Punchinella. And so if you Google it, sometimes you'll see, I forget, one of them is actually the name of the old Punch and Judy puppets. So the Punch puppet, actually, the full name is Punchinella, or Anyway, but if you Google Punchinella or Punchinella, um, you'll come up with it. Or if you type in sequin waste, so when they make sequins for garments and fabric and such, that it's made out of plastic, and they end up with the waste, and then it's like, oh, all these perfect little circles. But yeah, you can find it eBay, Etsy. You might be able to find it in some of the smaller arts and crafts stores. I haven't seen it in some of the bigger places. Don't know if you all can hear my dogs going crazy downstairs. Probably some kind of delivery. How dare somebody walk up on our porch? So I'm just going back and strengthening some of the lines in here, making some of them a little bit thicker, a little bolder, especially at the edges. But this is something I can get caught up in and spend a lot of time doing, so I've got to kind of not get too lost in it. Yeah, the other restriction, the size was really good for helping me with this challenge, but then also limiting the time. So just giving myself 1 hour and saying, okay, you've got to make something and basically be completed and sign it at the end. And even if I felt like something was not, or if I felt like there were some that I felt like I could work on longer, I didn't. It was like after I was done that 45 minutes, an hour, I was done. But that's just a good challenge, that setting a time limit. Limitations can help us with our creativity. They just kind of give us they give us some parameters to work in. Sorry, just looking over the comments and somebody's mentioning how it's relaxing, and then of course my dogs bark. So I do think I want to do like I've done before, and I want to use some maps. I love using maps, but then I've been using circles a lot. So there's a couple things. So I have this little map part right now. It's kind of blending in. I'll do something dark around it to make it really pop out. But there are two things that I'm noticing. There are two blue lines on this. It's from the grid, from the map. So I just kind of felt like, oh, it might be interesting to take my blue pen and a ruler and put those lines all the way through the whole piece. Just debating if I should put another one in. It's like trying to trust my gut, trying to go with my intuition, but then it's like part of me is like, yes, put more in, and then the other part of me is like, no, don't. And then the other thing I said, there were two things. There's a red line goes right up this road, but it's I believe it's the metro in Washington D.C. Because then there's a little rectangle on it that is a station. I think I'll put another red line down here. Just pulled out a thicker black pen. Always something to bark at. Okay, I think I'm gonna do something I've done a lot. One of the things that I've been doing a lot with these circles is just to take a little bit of yellow paint and make it yellow. I do this for a couple reasons. Number one is just to kind of make some contrast. And so this circle was blending into the security envelope and into the squares that I had made earlier. And so this helps distinguish it. The dark line, of course, around it does that too. But then also I do it because we often associate yellow and, you know, this light kind of yellow, bright yellow with light. You know, ask any kid what color the sun is. Oh, it's yellow. And, oh, draw some lights on in the house. They're yellow. So we associate that with light. And one of the notions, along with this idea of the hero's journey, another notion that's come up a lot for me here lately is this idea of shining, of people often dim their own lights so that they don't shine. And I kind of feel like that's part of my hero's journey, is to teach people that they can shine. So I think, to me, that's this sort of yellow circle in a lot of these has become symbolic of that shine. Okay. I was just looking at the time, and it's about 5 o'clock here on the East Coast. So I think I'm going to call this done and sign it. This one, to me, felt much more relaxed. Kind of, I think, in execution, and also just the feeling of it. It's not too busy, but so yeah. So there's day number 30. I thought, since I have the stack back here, let me reach back here and get them. That I'd do a quick flip through. I have been posting these on Facebook, so you can also see them on Facebook. But I just thought, well, let's go ahead and take a look at them. So, I mean, it's a nice big fat stack of artwork, 30 pieces. So I start off a little bit more representational. That's, of course, that's an image of myself, but there's the maps, some squares, using the Punchinella to do some circles. I tried the light bulb. I did not like the light bulb at all, but some mapping marks, some circles, some actual maps in the back. So like I said, I was working a little bit more representational. Here's a little silhouette. Another item I love to use is the text from books. And this one I just felt like was too busy. I didn't really like it. I did use some photos from some hikes that that I went on, and I don't know, this one just felt a little too much. This one has to be one of my favorites, and I think there's a simplicity there that I really like. So this was like one of the first ones that I was like, yeah, I really, really like that. And I also use bingo numbers from some bingo cards I have. And of course, we've got my squares, got a map, got lots of circles. Another one where I try to use some photos. This was from magazines, and I like the background. I don't necessarily like the flower part. One with a face, that was okay. Then I took an image of myself and did a transfer with it. So I was doing a lot of these kind of organic. This looks like a river kind of lines, but this is the first one I really used that organic kind of flowy line. And this is something totally different for me. But yeah, so see a lot of similarities, more bingo numbers. Kind of like this one too. It has a simplicity that I like. I like the red lines. Same thing with this one. There's something about the simplicity. I think I tend to overwork stuff. So being able to like simplify, like this one feels much busier, but I like it. And I like the bold black lines. And then using the bold black lines on this one led to using them on this one. This one I really do like. It is kind of busy, but I think the bold black lines really kind of help tie everything together, and the background's actually pretty simple. And this was one where I limited my color palette, and I just did a black and white color scheme with red. That one was fun to do, and I used some tracing paper. And then this was where that tree-like image kind of first came up. And I mean, I've used it many times before in previous work, but not in this series. And I liked it, but it was a little too formal. And then the background was very plain, so the very next day I did something very similar and did more of a background. So it's really interesting to see how things have changed, how things evolved, how things were different from day to day, but how there are lots of elements that are similar. So there's those wavy lines again. some circles, maps in the back. That white gel pen is fun to use. Can bring a lot of. Can I go this way now? Got them turned the wrong way. So yeah, I like how this one turned out. It was kind of dark. It's one of the reasons I used the white. More circles. I like the simplicity of this one. And this is where I started using that tree-like image with the circle in it. I really like this one. This is another favorite of mine. Again, the circle, the tree-like or cave-like image, whatever you want to call it. This one I felt was like a little bit clunky. There's more of the black lines and the white lines. And I like this one, but it's like the blue cave tree, maybe that's what it is. It's a cave tree. Just too straight up and down. But I do like this one. This is one of my favorites, and I think it's because this flows. I really like that. I like this one too, again, because of the flow. And there was yesterday's. A little busy, but I like these black lines. And that brings us to today. So this is different because it uses that form, but it's not the tree-like anymore. Kind of interesting. So anyway, so that's it for day number 30. Let me go ahead and switch this over. So, anyway, I really, like I said, I really appreciate people that have tuned in, have made art, have just kind of listened to me. Hopefully you were able to get something out of it. And like I said, I won't be live streaming every day in October, but I think I'm going to try to do it several times a week, maybe a Monday, Wednesday, Friday kind of thing. Those are Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays are my days off from managing a local art center, and so it's a little bit easier for me to show up, and I'll maybe even try to do it a little bit earlier in the day, so that way folks can tune in from other areas as well. But yeah, I just really appreciate you showing up and you know, making some art with me. If you have been making art, I would love to see it, so you can post it in the comments. You can post it on social media and tag me. Love to see what you've been doing, even if it's not like what I've been doing. If it's just, totally different and you've been doing your own thing, I'd love to see it. I love seeing what people make. And then, just a little shameless plug. I do have some online workshops that are starting next week, and they are pay what you can, and they're both 4-week workshops. They're in the evening, so 7 p.m., 7 p.m. on Monday, 7 p.m. on Wednesday. They're both visual journal workshops, and love to have some of you join me. Even if you're like, I can't make the live ones, I always record them, and then you have access to them later. So some people kind of like that, to do kind of a self-paced thing. So anyway, just going to throw that out there in case you're wondering. And I mentioned yesterday that I'm thinking about maybe in October taking all 30 of these and posting them up. Just basically find them new homes. They're going to go up for adoption. So anyway, I really appreciate you all being here. I'm going to take a look at the comments, see if anybody has any questions, and then we'll sign off. But yeah. All right, so there's a question. Sherry Cherry asked about the Inktense paints, and the thing, Derwent sells them. So Derwent sells the paint pans. So it's like the Inktense travel paint pan set or something like that. And they have 2 palettes, and then they actually have a third, bigger 24 color palette. And Yeah, I like it. I like them because just like watercolor paint. But yeah, they do sell refill blocks now. I usually get mine from Blick Art Materials. Derwent is an English company, so they're over in the UK, and there for a while you couldn't get replacements for the pans, which I was like, oh man, I'm running out of certain colors. But now I can see that Blick is carrying them. So yeah, and they're inexpensive actually. They're like these sets at Blick are like $25, which sometimes people are like $25 for watercolor or for paints. Um, that's cheap. That's inexpensive for a 12 color set of good water soluble paints. So anyway, so if you have any other questions, pop them in the comments, and I'll try to respond later today when I have a chance to sit down and read through all the comments. But like I said, I really appreciate you being here, and thank you so much, and happy creating.